So, with many people out there trying to get into PC gaming for cheap, I decided to see if building a Socket 775 build is still worth it. Off we have the legendary Core 2 Quad Q6600, which costs £6 and is a 4-core, 4-thread CPU that runs at 2.4 GHz and can be easily overclocked to 3 GHz with a good motherboard. However, our board today can't overclock this processor. The motherboard that we have chosen is the Intel G41 board that came with a Core 2 Duo E7400 that we won't be using today, and an Intel stock cooler and 2GB of RAM for £23. I also got this bundle of 3 pretty low end 2GB sticks for £5, which is fine for the type of build today. For the graphics card, I have decided to go with the AMD Radeon HD 7770 1GB variant, which is perfect pairing for this CPU and cost £22 from WeBuy UK. I would have gone for the 2GB model, but I could not find any for a good price at the time. However, usually the 2GB models go for around £25 on WeBuy UK. For the hard drive, I went for this Seagate Barracuda 7200 RPM 500GB drive, as they are reliable and only cost £10 from WeBuy UK. For the power supply, I managed to get this Corsair CX500, which was an open box item for £48.70. And I cleaned it before I put it in the PC, obviously, as it's quite dusty. And for the case, I have gone with the cheapest new case I could find, which is this one by Aerocore, which cost £22. So, let's get to the build. So here is the finished PC, and for £140 the PC doesn't look too bad in terms of aesthetics. But let's get this PC up and running. When I first booted the PC up, I did have a few issues with the PC not booting. Thanks to the BIOS beeps, I knew this was a problem with incompatible memory. Found out for some reason unknown to me, it didn't like the Hynix stick of RAM, which is very strange as normally Hynix is high quality RAM and works with most boards. But this is the LGA 775 boards all over with their very strange RAM compatibility. But I did find a 1GB stick of DDR2 RAM lying around, and that worked. So now we have 7GB of RAM and not 8. First off, I needed to make a new Windows 10 bootable stick as I had formatted the USB a few weeks ago to perform a BIOS flash on my main PC. So while I had to wait for that to be created, I decided to make a quick brew. When I came back, finally my Windows 10 install had finally been created, and I was able to get Windows 10 installed on this PC. I did have a few issues with it not latching on at first, but after a few attempts and changing the USB port, eventually it brought me to the Windows setup screen. So now the PC is all set up and ready to go. Let's see how it performs. Firstly, general usage was pretty snappy with a few bits of slowdown now and again, but this is expected with the age of the components. YouTube worked perfectly. As you can see, it loaded pretty quickly and could play 1080p 60 FPS video with no issues or hitches. Even scrubbing through the video was little to no issue for this PC. Also, general web browsing was good, and sites that I usually use like Futbin and Twitch ran completely fine, and there was next to no slowdown even when loading graphical images thanks to that quad-core CPU. Even though it is old, it still had no problems loading these graphical images on these sites. As you can see, everything loaded quite quickly for the age of the machine that we're on, and this will get you by if you want to just web browse, YouTube and content consumption. If you also use a lot of Twitch, this PC was also good, as it had little to no slowdown on Twitch. You could play and watch your favourite streamers completely fine on this hardware despite its age. But you guys didn't come here to see how it performs on web browsing, so let's see how it games. First off, I tried CSGO at the low settings and shadow set to high with 2x MSAA. It ran fairly well at an average of 62 FPS, a 1% low of 17 FPS and a 0.1% low of 0.6 FPS. Those lows were mainly at the start of the game and could be prevented by turning off MSAA. The games did take a long time to load as well at the start, as the CPU is working at 100% to get these maps to load, so that will be a CPU limitation there, is that you'll have to wait a while for your CSGO matches to load. So next off, I tried everyone's favourite game, Fortnite, which had some really strange issues, as you can see on the screen. Textures most of the time would not load and you were left with this mess. I'm not the only one who's experienced this on lower end hardware, as Random Gaming HD has experienced this as well recently, and it seems to be a CPU limitation in my case with this system, as the CPU was at 100% usage most of the time, but this could also be down to that 1GB of VRAM on our HD 7770. The average for this game was 43 FPS, the 1% low was 0.1 FPS, and the 0.1% low was 0.1 FPS. But as you can see, I definitely would not call this playable. As you can see, it is an absolute mess. So moving away from this mess, the next game that I tried out was Grand Theft Auto 5 with the normal preset, which is the lowest on the game, and the shadows were also set to low. We also saw a CPU limitation in this game as well, with some textures not loading again. However, the average for the benchmark was 89 FPS with a 1% low of 28 FPS and a 0.1% low of 4 FPS. But yet again, I would not call this playable. Maybe if you could drop it down to 720p on most of these games that we've seen today, you may be able to stop this texture problem and CPU limitation, but I prefer to play at 1080p, and I know a lot of other people like to as well. But the option is there if you want to drop the resolution. So moving away from this, we have a game that actually worked quite well, and this is the final game that I tested, which was Cities Skylines, which did really surprise me. With the highest settings, we saw an average of 28 FPS, a 1% low of 6 FPS, and a 0.1% low of 0.5 FPS. But this game is at the highest setting, which is really good and could easily get higher frame rates if you don't mind lowering those settings a bit. However, this title did seem to use most of our RAM in-game, so please keep that in mind if you have a system like this and you want to play a city builder like Cities Skylines. So to conclude, should you build yourself a Socket 775 system? Probably not. The main reason is building it part by part isn't as good value as it used to be, and mainly due to how much these parts cost separately and how limited this CPU is, with games like Apex Legends even refusing to run on this CPU. Most people will be much better off at this price range buying a pre-built or small form factor PC with an i5 in and installing a card like a GTX 750 Ti 2GB. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.